Hey there, I'm Olivia-Savannah here at Olivia's Catastrophe, and I am a publicist in the publishing industry. I work specifically on sci-fi, fantasy, horror and romantasy books, and a question I get asked quite often is, what does being a publicist in the book industry actually involve? So I'm here to tell you kind of things that I do as part of my job that will give you a better idea and a better semblance. I haven't asked for like Q&A questions, but if anybody has any questions about my role in publishing, feel free to drop them in the comments. So I'm going to start with what I do and then kind of how I got there. So right now I'm currently a publicity manager. It means that the publicity I do is quite different to the publicity that other people do because I'm talking to a very different group of people. Let me start from when I get a book and what I do as part of the campaign. So let's say we're publishing a book called The Magics of Olivia-Savannah by Olivia-Savannah, and so I will be brought into that process quite early on. So in terms of when we buy the book, I will read it. When we're deciding whether or not to buy it, I will have a little voice and contribution in that discussion. This is at the acquisition period, so the editor will bring it to the table like, do I want to buy this book? And then different people in various teams read it and say, yeah, I think we should, or no, I think we shouldn't, and why, yes or no. And once that's collectively been agreed, so I'll have been part of the process of reading a sample of that and kind of feeding back my thoughts on it and what I can do in terms of a publicity campaign. So I'm part of the journey in that early on stage. Then I'm pretty much not involved until much later on as the book gets closer to publication. And what I will do then is that I will hopefully read the book myself and be able to understand elements of the book, whether it's a queer book or whether there is a certain type of magic in it, or what kind of person is this book for. I will think about the audience and who I should be pitching this book to. I'll then make my press release. The press release is kind of a piece of a documentation that tells you about the book. It's got the title on it, it's got the synopsis on it, it's got, you know, quotes from other authors, what they thought about it, the author's bio on it, maybe a picture of the author, what the cover looks like, publication day, price, cost, lots of different information on this press release. And that is to make sure that the people I'm talking to, once I'm done talking to them, I can give them the copy of a book, proof probably, and also a copy of a press release so that they can remember and refer to this information whenever they want. I will do a proof mailing at the beginning. This is not to influencers, this is specifically for journalists. Now I speak to a very specific group of journalists. They are often the sci-fi, fantasy and horror community. So think of things like SFX magazine, which is a genre fiction magazine, Starburst magazine, but also I will be pitching to online outlets such as the Fantasy Hive or Culturefly, pop culture outlets, the kind of places online where you look for listicles of fantasy books, or you look for written pieces by the author, interviews by the author, chapter samplers online. I will be behind the scenes pitching for those slots. I will be going to those journalists and also to those people who create those on those websites and say, this is a book that I'm working on. Would you like a copy to read? Would you like to interview the author? Would you like to get a written piece from the author? And before I do that pitching, I will also have a conversation with the author themselves to see what they have time for, because they're often on a writing deadline or they've got real life to deal with as well. So it matters how much time they can put aside for the publicity themselves. So I have a conversation with the author, what they're happy to write about, how they want this book to be spoken about, and then I go forth and I do my pitching to journalists. Journalists will say yes, no, what about this? I might brainstorm ideas with them, and I'll send them a copy of the book so that they have it to refer to with the press release as well. As well as pitching to journalists, I will work very closely with our marketing person and our influencer team to determine a list of influencers to send proofs out to as well. This is so that there's online buzz building online. This will be Instagrammers, TikTokers, booktubers. But as well as that, I also later on, closer to publication, set up a blog tour. Now blog tours are different from proof mailings in the fact that it's not just for readers to have copies in advance that they can share beautiful pictures of to build the excitement and talk about online and share their reviews in due time, but these are finished copies that I send out, which are the final hardcover or the final paperback if I'm working on a paperback, where they will have a specific date to share online and share their review and review thoughts. This is specifically for around publication, for people to really know genuine opinions of what people think of the book. So there are 2 influencers mailings that are done: the proof mailing, which is done early, and then the finished copy mailing, which is more limited and done towards the end. I will also, as well as pitching to journalists, as well as all of that, I will be having loads of conversations with podcast hosts and book clubs and different people that I think could get on board with the book. And this will very much be catered towards the book. If the book is a queer book, I'll be talking to Pink News and them and outlets like that that could support it in a way that other books, they wouldn't support other books. If it is a Scottish author, I might be pitching to Scottish press and Scottish media. If it is a Black or a person of colour author, I'll be talking to some of the Black outlets that we have, or some of the, outlets that are really promoting and looking at supporting diverse voices and authors. There are so many different ways to pitch, and there are so many different people to pitch to. It is also really imperative to really focus on what the author themselves are happy and comfortable to talk about with the books. Some books are based on true experiences, or some books they need to be handled in a certain way. So I try to be sensitive to that as well in my pitching. And yes, I will also be pitching to podcast hosts so that they have opportunities to be chatting to podcasters for episodes. And as you can imagine, when it comes to setting up a podcast interview, there's a lot of email back and forth that I'm doing between the author to find out their schedule and what time they have, but also with the podcast hosts we can match up. Because of a lot of my authors are based in the US, it also means I'm flicking between time zones to make sure everybody's getting the same time for the slots. It gets a little bit complicated when I'm doing all of that. I will have my own personal calendar where I'm keeping all of my authors' deadlines in mind for written pieces or interviews or anything they need to hand in to me and I need to pass on to somebody else. So it's a lot of organisation that is required for my job to make sure I'm just keeping track of what everybody's doing, when they need it to be done by, sending reminders, chasers, podcast links, that kind of thing. All of that aside, if the author is going to be doing an events tour, which is quite a big thing, that takes a whole nother level of organisation. I need to determine when my author will be available to do events within their own schedule. With the US, this means I will be booking flights for them to come over, or if they're already in the UK, that means that I've got them here to work with. I will be contacting bookshops to make sure that they are willing to do an event. So I need to sometimes contact multiple and be like, do you want to do an event? Or sometimes there'll be so much desire for events that the bookshops have to contact me and pitch to me, and I have to choose between which bookshops because there's only a set amount of time that authors can do events for. So I will be choosing the bookshops that we're going to be working with. I will then be making sure that they get the links online, organize an events announcement, making sure that the marketeer is briefed with all the information she needs on which dates the author will be where. I will be setting up the schedule myself to make sure that the journey they're taking is not London, Scotland, Leeds, Cardiff. I need to make a trail to make it something that they can actively follow and actually do. And then I'll get the complicated task of booking all the hotels, booking all the trains. If they're doing signings along the way or recording with other podcasts and press in person, you need to make sure that you're building their schedule so that they'll be here at X point, time for them to have lunch. Sometimes they need to have social lunches where they get downtime, or maybe they need time to breathe and relax, but maybe they also need to have a meeting. If you are setting up events, you also need to make sure there's a chairperson who's there to ask them questions, that they get a copy of the book if you're booking their travel and hotel as well. And sometimes with authors, you are going to go on tour with them, so you also need to book your own trains and your own hotels. And then part of my job will be going on the tour with them and spending the day with them, making sure they're getting to all the places that they need to be, and just being a publicist who is controlled over that schedule, protecting their downtime and peaceful time, but also making sure they can do what they need to do to meet their readers in person and be able to have that queue time, which means you do end up traveling with your authors and working in the evenings as you work these events. I think the common thought is that the events tour happens close to publication, and that is likely the situation, but that doesn't mean events don't happen throughout the year. I work on our horror list, and so a grouping of horror events that bookshops want to put together, which are often panels with other authors, happen around October time because that's where spooky season is. Or there'll be romance panels in February for romantasy authors. So even though the events tour can be a thing that happens, it doesn't mean actually when the book is published that your work on that campaign campaign is done, because you then might be setting up events for them in October and panels and talking to other publicists to help put it together if it's a range of authors from different publishers. Throughout the year there's also book festivals, so different book festivals have different themes. Comic-Con is a very nerdy one with lots of genre fiction, so Comic-Con is one of my main festivals, but there's also different festivals across the country: Edinburgh International Book Festival, Edgelit, Chimera Festival. There's just several throughout the UK at different times of year, and so I need to be on top of when they are programming for those events and pitching to those festivals, and hopefully getting my authors booking events there as well. I sometimes go to the festivals too, and I sometimes let the authors go on their own. So I've told you kind of what I do for a book campaign, so you understand what I'm doing when I'm working on a book. And now the next thing you need to understand is that I can be working on a range from 1 book to 6 books a month. So just think of all that work that I've done for one individual author and multiply it sometimes by 4, sometimes by 5, sometimes by 6 in a single month. So I'm also doing different things at different points throughout the year, and you keep all of those balanced and you keep all of them, you know, in your mind. You have to be very organized to make sure you are giving all of your authors the time and space and the pitching slots that you possibly can. So that's kind of what I do for my job. There's another side to any corporate job, I suppose, which is meetings. We love a meeting. So as I said, I work with the editorial team and the marketing team quite closely, but those are not the only teams. There's also the sales team, and so I spend a lot of time talking to the various departments and teams so they know what I'm doing, but I also know what they're doing. I think the most important ones for me are the editorial team, who have a very good understanding of what the book is about, but also about the different stages of where the book is at. So I know when proofs are coming and that kind of thing, when we have text. But I specifically also spend a lot of time talking to the marketing team, because the marketing and publicity timeline very much so match up. Influencer activity crosses between marketing and publicity departments, but so much does too. Anytime I set up events, I want an events announcement which needs a graphic for it. Marketeer designs that. Blog tours, I need a graphic for it. Marketeer designs that. So there are lots of things that I ask on the marketeer and things that she asks of me. But yeah, I work very closely with the marketing team, and so there's plenty of meetings where we catch up on our books so we could talk about what's going on with them. But again, also sales, it's really helpful to know if a book is in a subs box, what I can do to amplify it. So there's a lot of talking to different departments, keeping everybody up to speed with what you're doing and what they're doing, and how we can support each other while working on a particular book. As well as that, books are not just published in this country alone, and often we share a publication date with the US, or also with Australia, or with other, you know, foreign countries as well. But mainly our main focus is the US and mirroring or supporting each other. So there's also meetings where we talk to whoever the US publisher is. So there's meetings with the US team and lots of emails and communications with the US team to make sure we're kind of on the same page with what we're sharing. Particularly in publicity, for example, I share chapter samplers sometimes, or little exclusive snippets of the book, but we also don't want to be sharing the exact same thing that the US is sharing, or we do. So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page for a lot of things. And when I'm organizing an events tour, for example, with a US author, I can't step on the toes of the US and book over their tour. So it's about communicating with what their schedule for the author looks like and what hours for the author looks like as well, because the author will be doing publicity for both the US, the UK, and possibly also international countries as well. So I feel like that's the bread and butter of what I do for my job. It just is a lot of juggling, organising, schedules, but it is very exciting to work on a lot of books that I really love, and within genres that I particularly love working on as well. And yeah, if you have any questions, just let me know down below. I think I want to talk a little bit about how I got my job, because I think that's a question that I get quite a lot, and it is, you know, to be honest, it is a whole load of applying. There are some things that I mentioned that really helped. So for example, I did study English Lit and creative writing, and actually when I mentioned that I studied English Lit and creative writing in my, you know, cover letter, it was less so about, you know, the fact that I really love books and I studied writing and reading, but more so about the fact that an English Lit creative degree allows you so much freedom and so much time and a lot of self-management of your time, because you have to do a lot of reading. And so I often mention that not only do I read a lot, which is kind of a requirement for the job, but I also learned how to manage my own time and also manage the time of other people when working in group projects. That was something that I would mention, for example. I've also been creating content online, as you are watching right now, for a very long time. I've been creating YouTube content, Bookstagram content, and a book blog back in the day, Instagram, TikTok. I've been on all the platforms possibly, Twitter back when it was a nice place. So I talked a lot about how I'm always current with trends and conversations happening in the book world, that I'm very tuned in with the community, but also that I've been across all of these social platforms and I understand how they all work, and I understand what influencers are looking for as an influencer myself. And so I know how to move with the times and move across and predict the book market. It's less about experience, and well, it is partly about experience, I have to be honest, but it is also about just showing you have that passion and that understanding. And particularly in publicity, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have personable skills of communication and organization. Those are two things you are absolutely going to need, because you're not only going to be managing your workload and your schedule, but several other authors' schedules as well. So I think those are some key things that really helped me get my role in publicity. I did actually start as a communications assistant, so I started as someone who worked in a cross between publicity and marketing, and I did think I was going to go into marketing and that was my goal, and then this job came up and I was like, do you know what, I'm going to cross into publicity because then I can work on genre fiction instead of staying in marketing but not particularly working on the genres that I work on now. But I did really like marketing as well, and I can see myself doing marketing in the future, but I can also see myself being very happy in publicity. So I hope you found that kind of helpful and that it gave you a better understanding of what I do as part of my job. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions below. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you do for work? Do you enjoy it? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!